Grandma Abani was 72, gentle and proud, living in the busy streets of Kigali. She had only one treasure left from her parents, a small piece of land, and she sold it with tears in her eyes. With trembling hands she counted the money, $35,000, and gave it to her son Tay. "Just promise me we'll all go together," she whispered, her voice shaking with both fear and hope. For her, this was not just a trip. It was a dream to see the world with her family before she grew too old to walk those faraway streets. The day of the journey came, and everyone dressed in their finest clothes, pulling shiny new suitcases behind them. At the airport, Grandma's heart beat fast as she clutched her passport, smiling like a child. But when the tickets were shown at the counter, her name was missing. She thought it was a mistake. She asked again, searching her son's face for comfort. Instead, Tay looked away, his voice flat and cold. "You'll understand, Mama. Maybe next time." The words pierced deeper than any knife. Grandma stood frozen, her body heavy with disbelief. The family hurried ahead, their laughter echoing, while she stood alone with her small suitcase. Her dream crumbled in that bright, noisy airport, and in that moment she realized the truth. She had given everything, but she was not wanted. The promise of a lifetime trip had turned into the sharpest betrayal of her life. Grandma Abani walked slowly out of the airport, her steps heavy as if every bone in her body carried a stone. Her small suitcase rolled unevenly behind her, the wheels rattling against the floor, but it felt heavier than any luggage she had ever carried. It was not just clothes inside. It was her broken hope, her wasted sacrifice, and the sting of betrayal. She wiped her face with the edge of her scarf and whispered softly to herself, "How could they leave me?" Her voice trembled, almost lost in the noise of car horns and busy travelers rushing past her. At the bus stop, she sat down quietly, her body hunched, her eyes fixed on the ground. When the old bus pulled up, she climbed in slowly, holding her suitcase close as if it were her only friend left. She chose a seat by the window and pressed her forehead against the glass. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks as the bus moved. Silent tears slipped down her wrinkled cheeks. She didn't sob loudly, she didn't make a sound. Her pain was quiet, but deep, and it sat heavy in the air around her. Neighbors recognized her on the bus and looked with surprise. This was the woman who had sold her land for her family's happiness. Why was she traveling alone, looking so lost? They whispered among themselves but said nothing, respecting her silence. Abani, too, said nothing. She only held her passport tightly in her hand, as though still clinging to the dream she had bought but never received. Meanwhile, at the airport lounge, her grandchildren were laughing and snapping selfies. Their faces glowed with excitement as they posted online, "Family dream trip begins." The photos showed smiles, new clothes, shiny bags, and captions full of joy. None of them noticed the woman sitting alone on the bus, staring out the window as if the world had left her behind. The internet loved their happy pictures, but no one knew the truth hidden behind them. Every mile the bus rolled forward, Grandma Abani's heart grew heavier. It was not the money she cried for, though she had given away her life's savings. It was something deeper, sharper, and harder to heal. It was the realization that she was never truly included, never considered important enough to stand beside them on this journey. She had thought she was the root of her family, the one who made everything possible. But now she understood they saw her only as a branch to cut away when convenient. By the time the bus pulled into her neighborhood, her scarf was wet with tears. She lifted her suitcase once more and stepped down slowly, greeted not by hugs or laughter, but by quiet stares from her neighbors. In that silence, she carried not just her bag, but the heavy truth: she had given her all, and in return, she had been forgotten. Grandma Abani sat quietly at the Kigali bus terminal long after her bus had stopped running. The night air was cold, and the plastic chair beneath her felt harder with every passing hour. In her hands, she held her passport tightly against her chest, as if it was the last piece of her dream she refused to let go of. Her suitcase rested by her feet, but she did not even notice it anymore. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her scarf damp with tears, yet she sat still, too weak to move, too broken to speak. People passed by in a rush, some glancing at her, others ignoring her completely. She looked like just another tired old woman in the city, but her pain was far greater than anyone could see. Among the strangers walking past was a young man with a small phone camera in his hand. He noticed the sadness in her eyes and paused. Something about the way she clutched her passport caught his heart. He walked closer, lowered his voice, and gently asked, "Grandma, are you okay?" She did not answer, only shook her head, a single tear sliding down her cheek. The man quietly pressed record, capturing the sight of her sitting there, small and fragile, holding on to a passport that would never be stamped. When he uploaded the short video online, he added a caption, "She paid for them all, yet they left her behind." Within hours, the video exploded across African social media. People were shocked, people were angry, and most of all, people were heartbroken. Comments poured in, "How could they do this to their own mother? She deserves the trip, not them. This is the face of our forgotten elders." The clip was shared thousands of times, then millions, reaching every corner of the continent. By morning, Grandma Ebony's face was everywhere. News pages picked up the story. Radio hosts discussed it live on air. People in markets and shops whispered her name with pity and admiration. She had become a symbol without even knowing it, a voice for all the old mothers and fathers who gave everything to their children and were later left behind. Strangers who had never met her felt connected to her pain. Messages of support filled the internet. Some offered money, others offered comfort, and many promised to never treat their parents the same way. Hashtags like #JusticeForGrandma and #NeverForgetOurElders trended online. For the first time in her life, Grandma Ebony, who had always lived quietly in her neighborhood, was now the heart of a movement bigger than herself. She still sat at the bus terminal, unaware of how far her story had traveled. She thought she was invisible, abandoned, and forgotten. But across Africa, millions were watching, listening, and standing for her. Ebony was no longer just a grandmother left behind at an airport. She had become the voice of respect, dignity, and the unbreakable strength of forgotten elders. Tay and his wife Linda landed in Paris with wide smiles, pulling their expensive suitcases behind them. Their children skipped happily, laughing as they looked around at the shining lights of the airport. For them, this was the dream they had been waiting for. They wasted no time. From the moment they reached their hotel, they began posting pictures. Linda posed by the balcony with the Eiffel Tower behind her, the children showed off fancy meals, and Tay proudly wrote captions like, "Living the Dream," and "Family Goals." For a short while, they felt on top of the world. But as soon as the pictures went online, the mood shifted. At first, a few friends commented politely, but soon the questions began. "Where's your mother?" one asked. Another wrote, "Isn't this the trip she paid for?" Under every new post, the same words appeared again and again, "Where's the woman who gave you everything?" At first, Tay ignored them, hoping the comments would disappear. But they did not. They grew louder, harsher, and more accusing. By the second day in Paris, their phones were buzzing non-stop. Linda opened her page only to see hundreds of strangers filling her photos with angry comments. "Shame on you. You left her behind. You sold your own mother for a ticket." Their children's smiling faces were now covered with emojis of disgust and broken hearts. What was meant to be a glamorous vacation had become an open wound for the world to see. When they arrived in Rome, things got even worse. The family checked into a luxury hotel, posting a video of themselves swimming in the rooftop pool. But instead of admiration, the comments turned into a storm. Thousands of people from across Africa and beyond had seen the viral video of Grandma Ebony, sitting alone at the bus terminal with her passport. They knew the truth now. Every post from Tay's family was seen as cruel and heartless. Followers unfollowed them in huge numbers. Even close friends cut ties, embarrassed to be associated with them. Tay tried to defend himself, replying to one of the comments, "You don't understand, it's complicated." But no one believed him. Screenshots spread everywhere, twisting his words into proof of guilt. His reputation, once respected in Kigali, was crumbling right before his eyes, not from rumors but from the truth everyone could see. His children, once excited about posting pictures, begged him to stop. "Baba, why is everyone calling us bad people?" they asked with frightened voices. Instead of joy, every day of the trip was filled with shame and fear. They hid inside their hotel rooms, afraid to go online, afraid to read the comments. What had begun as their proudest moment had turned into their most painful humiliation. The world had chosen sides, and it was not with them. The family that abandoned Grandma was now abandoned themselves, trapped in a vacation that felt more like a punishment than a dream. Grandma Ebony returned to her small house in Kigali, moving slower than before, her body tired but her heart even more so. She kept her passport in a small drawer, unable to throw it away, though every time she looked at it, her eyes filled with tears. She spent her days sitting quietly on her porch, neighbors passing by with kind nods but also with sorrow in their eyes. The video of her at the bus terminal had already spread everywhere, and strangers whispered her name as if she was part of their own family. Still, Grandma lived quietly, unsure what would come next. One bright afternoon, a black car stopped in front of her home. Out stepped a tall woman dressed in a sharp suit but with gentle eyes. She was Dr. Nia Kamau, a well-known businesswoman in East Africa, respected and admired. She had seen the viral clip, and something about Grandma's face reminded her of her own late mother. She walked up to the porch, held Grandma's hand softly, and said in a voice filled with warmth, "You remind me of my mother. She never got the chance to travel, but I see her in you. Come with me. Let's give you the trip you deserve." Grandma looked at her with disbelief, her lips trembling. "Me? Travel? Again?" she whispered, afraid it might be another cruel trick. But Dr. Nia smiled and nodded firmly. "Yes, Mama. This time, it will be your name on the ticket. No one will take it away from you." Tears streamed down Grandma's face as she covered her mouth in shock. For the first time in weeks, her heart felt alive again, touched not by blood family, but by the kindness of a stranger. Within days, preparations were made. Tailors brought her new dresses, neighbors came to wish her well, and reporters gathered outside her home, capturing every moment. She was no longer the forgotten old woman at the bus terminal. She was now a symbol of dignity and strength, about to take the trip she had always dreamed of. When the day of travel finally came, Grandma Abney arrived at the airport once more, but this time everything was different. She held her passport proudly, her ticket shining with her name printed clearly, Abney Uwimana. At the counter, the staff smiled warmly at her, and when she stepped onto the plane, she was led straight to a first-class seat. The soft leather chair, the kind attendants, the respectful greetings, everything felt like a dream. As the plane lifted off the ground, Grandma looked out of the window, her eyes wide and wet with tears. She whispered a prayer of gratitude, her voice shaking. This time, she was not left behind. This time, the journey was hers, and hers alone, with her name shining proudly in the skies. When Grandma Abney stepped off the plane in Paris, she felt like she was walking into another world. The airport staff welcomed her with flowers, and cameras flashed as journalists called her name. For years she had lived a quiet life in Kigali, unnoticed by most, but now the whole world seemed to be watching. Dr. Nia walked proudly beside her, guiding her through the crowd as if she were royalty. For the first time, Grandma felt seen, not as someone's mother or someone's sacrifice, but as herself, a woman finally receiving the honor she deserved. In Paris, she sat at a cafe near the Eiffel Tower, sipping coffee slowly, smiling shyly at strangers who waved at her. Someone snapped a photo and posted it online with the caption, "From betrayal to Paris dreams." It spread quickly, and people cheered for her in the comments. Children ran up to her asking for pictures, and she laughed, her wrinkles deepening with joy instead of sorrow. The internet was filled with her smile, and it was brighter than the city lights around her. In Rome, she strolled through cobblestone streets, holding her scarf against the breeze. She visited the Colosseum, her eyes wide with wonder, and enjoyed plates of pasta served with care by waiters who already knew her story. One photo showed her sipping a tiny cup of espresso, her eyes sparkling with delight. That picture alone went viral, with headlines saying, "Grandma Abney, the woman who turned heartbreak into hope." Her journey continued to Venice, where she was helped into a gondola. As the boat glided across the calm canals, she laughed freely, her voice echoing against the old buildings. Crowds clapped from the bridges, and tourists cheered as if she were a queen. More pictures followed, Grandma wrapped in a shawl, her hand trailing across the water, her face glowing with peace. Luxury hotels opened their doors to her as an honored guest. Chefs prepared special meals, musicians played for her, and everywhere she went, people called her name with admiration. She was no longer just a grandmother from Kigali, she had become an international symbol. Reporters wrote stories about her strength, her betrayal, and her victory. Across social media, the hashtags #GrandmaAbney and #FromPain2Power dominated the trends. People shared her pictures with words of love, "She is all of our grandmother. She reminds us never to forget those who gave us everything." Even those who had never met her felt proud of her triumph. What was once her deepest shame had now become her greatest glory. She was not left behind in silence anymore. She was celebrated, cherished, and lifted high for the whole world to see. Grandma Abney had turned betrayal into triumph, and her laughter, echoing through Paris, Rome, and Venice, proved that dignity could never be stolen. When Tay and his family finally returned home from Europe, they walked through the Kigali airport expecting to be admired. They imagined friends and neighbors asking about Paris, Rome, and Venice. They thought people would be curious about their photos, their stories, their adventures. But instead of smiles, they were met with cold stares. Strangers whispered as they passed, their eyes filled with judgment. The once proud family, dressed in expensive clothes from their trip, suddenly felt exposed and ashamed. As they drove back into their neighborhood, Tay noticed posters and newspapers at small kiosks. On the covers was not him, not his wife or children, but his mother, Grandma Abney. Her smiling face shone proudly from magazine pages. Headlines read, "From Betrayal to Triumph, Grandma Abney's Journey," and "The Mother Africa Refused to Forget." The very woman he had abandoned was now the one being celebrated, while he was invisible. His children, once excited to tell their friends about their vacation, sank low in their seats, embarrassed to see their grandmother adored by the entire city. At home, the humiliation grew worse. Neighbors who once greeted Tay warmly now crossed the street when they saw him. Some shook their heads in silence, others muttered loud enough for him to hear, "He sold his own mother for a ticket." Invitations to community meetings stopped coming. Business partners, who once sought his friendship, now kept their distance. One by one, calls about deals and partnerships disappeared. His phone, once filled with opportunities, became silent. Meanwhile, the television played interviews of Grandma Abney, her voice calm but powerful as she spoke about forgiveness, respect, and dignity for elders. People across the country admired her wisdom. She was invited to events, celebrated as a guest of honor, and treated with love wherever she went. Tay, on the other hand, could not escape the shame. His name had become a warning, a symbol of greed and betrayal. Parents told their children, "Do not grow up to be like Tay." Even his children began to question him. "Baba, why did you leave Grandma behind?" "Everyone at school talks about it," they said with tears in their eyes. Lin Dao too, once proud of their glamorous trip, now avoided meeting people's eyes at the market. She knew the family's reputation had been destroyed. Tay tried to defend himself, telling people it was all a misunderstanding, that things were more complicated than they seemed. But no one listened. The viral video, the online comments, and Grandma's radiant smile in first class were stronger than his excuses. The community had already judged him. His fall was complete, and it was public. For Tay, the trip that was supposed to raise his family's status had instead crushed it. While his mother stood tall, respected and celebrated, he was left in the shadows, carrying the heavy weight of a reputation that would never recover. The community hall was full that evening. People from every corner of the neighborhood came, eager to see the woman whose story had touched the world. Cameras flashed, children sat on the floor, and elders leaned forward, waiting for her words. Then, slowly, Grandma Abney entered. She wore a simple dress, her scarf neatly tied, and in her hand she carried two things, her passport and her plane ticket, the symbols of both her pain and her triumph. The room grew quiet as she walked to the front, her step steady, her face calm but strong. She looked around at the faces before her, many smiling, some with tears, and then she spoke softly, yet her voice carried across the hall. "Money can buy trips," she said, holding up the ticket, "but it cannot buy respect." The room stirred with murmurs, every word sinking deep into their hearts. She raised her passport gently. "I gave all I had to my son, thinking love was enough. I raised a son, but the world raised me higher." The hall erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, their voices echoing with pride. Some shouted her name, others simply wiped tears from their eyes. For them, she was no longer just a mother, she was a lesson, a living example of dignity. In the crowd, Tay stood with his head hung low. He could not look at her, could not meet the eyes of his neighbors who now saw him as the man who betrayed his own mother. The shame weighed heavier than any burden he had ever carried. Grandma Abney did not linger. She smiled, thanked the crowd, and walked away slowly. This time, she was not forgotten. This time, she was celebrated.